Welcome, everyone. This is the Sigma stream of the Granite Mountain Movie Club. We're just going to be talking about stuff, not movies. Talking about, some news of the week sort of things. Let's jump off. Well, first, I got Cool Fraser here.
Hi, cool and listening.
And then we got Degree Studies
Hello.
and Arturo,
Hey everyone.
our chief legal correspondent, Arturo.
It's Arturo de la Esquire.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump right into it. So this week, this guy who goes by Martyr Maid, aka Daryl Cooper, he goes on the Tucker Carlson show on TCN, the Tucker Carlson network, and he does this sort of World War II revisionism thing. Talks about how I think he was being a little. There was some showmanship, some showmanship involved, but he says like something to the effect of, Churchill was the actual villain of World War II. Now this caused kind of a big thing. Take it from there, guys. What happened, and like, what's the fallout from that, and what is your take on his take?
I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I saw the part where he was comparing Nazis to Israelis, which I feel like is a comparison that's done quite often, among people who are like pro-Palestine.
Who are the Nazis now?
Yeah, and it seemed fine what I heard. Like, it's obviously like you shouldn't say those things if you don't want people getting mad at you or whatever. But like it was a fine point to make. But everyone on like the Bush era right wing, like the Cheneyites, as we call them, or something. I don't know. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe he would say that this," and they like posted a bunch of like Holocaust facts to like debunk that Nazis killed some of their POWs and Jews because it was too costly or something. Which like is still bad, but apparently that's not evil enough, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, it's sort of a semi-standard. It's not a novel, I guess, revisionist take or revisionist perspective or framing on what the Nazis did in World War II and like the various war crimes, crimes against humanity, whatever you want to call them. Because I mean, he doesn't say obviously that it was good or whatever. He just sort of has a different perspective on the bureaucratic or the
right. It almost seems like what he was trying to do was like say, this isn't like cartoon villain evil that you hear about, but like there's actual like reasons why people chose to do things, like whether or not it's cartoon villain evil. Like I think if you're a serious historian, you should probably be looking for like explanations as to why people would do stuff, and the point, the part I saw, what the point he was trying to make is that he's like Palestinians are dying, and they might die at like quite a rate, and to act like Israelis have no no responsibility in that is disingenuous, because like and he was trying to make the point that like that would be like the Nazis claiming no responsibility for the Jews dying due to disease and famine,
Starvation,
or whatever. Yeah.
What degree studies did you? Because I didn't really. Degree studies, did you watch it?
Yeah, well, so I only saw part of it, but I did see people on Twitter saying they were like, "You just stole Pat Buchanan's interpretation of World War II," and Martyr Maid was like, "Yes," but that confused me a little because Pat Buchanan and maybe Martyr Maid would say that Buchanan was dissembling, but like Buchanan was always like the Nazis are bad guy. He just kind of had like a different view on the war being unnecessary and certain Allied actions being bad. But I think, I don't know, I don't want to counter signal too much, but I do think there's an annoying thing in revisionism, or there's an annoying tendency, and Martyr Maid does this a lot, where it's like, in lieu of making an argument that we're sure is genuine, they say something lawyerly like, well, you can build a case that actually Churchill was uh, the biggest villain of the war. And like, I sort of want to stop and clarify, like, do you actually believe that, or you're just saying that a case can be built? Because like, those aren't the same. And I always think about, there's a weird thing the revisionists do where like they sort of want to say, like, under this universal morality of the post-war left or whatever, the Allies actually look in retrospect like villains during World War II. But that's like weird, because isn't that the model of morality we don't adopt? Like, I think I have a vision of Churchill that's like, yes, he killed a lot of people, including a lot of German civilians or whatever. He made decisions that led to a lot of deaths, and he sort of handed over the Anglo Empire to the United States. But like, if you view history in more like contingent, I don't know, national terms, like, I don't know what else an English leader could have done. Like, there were a number of, so I certainly don't see Churchill as like a um especially cruel or malicious actor. I think he was just like executing a war. And I'm certainly,
Right.
I think I'm on board with the part that's like, this was not a Marvel movie. It wasn't the Avengers versus a bad guy. I actually like that part of it, but I don't like the part where it's like, actually Thanos is who you thought the good guy was. Like, that's, I mean, everybody says this, but that's just like the mirror image of the thing you're trying to critique. And I couldn't tell if he genuinely thinks that's true, that Churchill is Hitler, or if he's like, wouldn't it be a neat magic trick if I claimed Churchill was Hitler and then had a bunch of like historifacts on my side that could really pwn you? Like, I didn't understand if it was a genuine argument or like an exercise in how you can build cases for various things and people should be less. I'm sorry, that was very long, but hopefully.
Part of it seems to be this. I think part of where he's working from is this idea, like, we think of Hitler as like sort of an unstoppable force or something, and he's not really a person. He's just like he's become a symbol, and he was going to do whatever he was going to do, and then so then Churchill becomes like the adult in the room. It's sort of like, oh well, Hitler's just this child or something, like he's just this insane guy. And Churchill had this opportunity, and which we don't really know. It's kind of a counterfactual, but conceivably he could have like um, facilitated a much earlier end to like German aggression or whatever, and then the overall body count would have been much lower, and like a world war would not have necessarily had to happen. Like, that's sort of the approach he seems to be taking. Like, Hitler's the main, or Churchill's the villain because he was accountable or something. Like, he was actually smart enough and learned enough or whatever, whereas Hitler was just sort of operating on impulse, which isn't necessarily how I don't know much about this guy Hitler, but that's like sort of the perception, the way he's treated in media and history.
Yeah, I think the point that was brought up on Twitter that I agree with is, I think revisionists sometimes take this view of like, Europeans, especially Western Europeans, should view themselves as united, and like they should want a united European civilization. And several like real history people have pointed out, like, the entire history of England is making sure continental Europe is not united, because a united continental Europe would mean like the end of Anglo influence and power. And so I think it's just weird to say like, oh, Churchill in this defining moment for Europe, like he decided to fight. It's like, yes, England always decides to fight, or always engineers conflict between Germany and France, because that's England's prerogative. And like, none of these countries have like a, I don't know what to call it, but like a Charlottesville rally view of what Europe should be. Like they've been in conflict for thousands of years, and it's like, in other words, Churchill was not breaking with Anglo tradition when he saw like a power that could potentially take over all of Europe as dangerous. It wasn't like some new liberal cucked ideology that was like, oh, England used to be united with all other Euros, but now they have this guy Churchill and they're scared. Like, no, they're always scared of power emerging and consolidating on the continent. So that's like totally in continuity with English political and military
Well,
history.
and I think one of Martyrmaid's things was sort of like, if I understood his claim correctly, and I will be the first to admit, like I'm not well read in history. I've got a lot of listeners who are probably going to be like you guys, or
Yeah, we're not history cells.
Granite specifically is retarded, but like if my understanding was of what Martyrmaid was saying, part of it was that like Churchill extended things to the point that because he wanted to get America involved, because he knew if he could get America and the Soviets involved, then like, well, the America specifically, if he could get us involved, then he would have a chance of winning. And I guess to that I would just be like, well, if you are the prime minister, that's like your play, I guess. I mean, other than I guess his other option was make peace with Hitler, but
Yeah, and I mean, he says, I guess Tucker asked him, what he thought might have been motivating Churchill, and I guess he said that he might have had various like psychological or pathological motives, which might be true as far as it goes. But I mean, like to Degree Study's point, like it doesn't really help to view him like his activities as particularly aberrant either. And that's what I think is sort of annoying about the tenor of what he does. Martyr does love. He's not like there are a lot of people who are like this. On the one hand, he seems to be promoting like this notion that we should look at history more dispassionately, but then at the same time, he says a lot of very emotive and like kind of histrionic things about most topics in general. So it's sort of hard. And this is perhaps why, like, I mean, apparently these podcasts are really good. I haven't really heard of them. But apparently they're very like sober and mature. And this happens a lot with writers too. Like I do feel like people's Twitter presence and their sort of like outbursts a lot of times like sort of make it hard to accept their work that they try to do with dispassion in the same light.
Yeah, I should say I'm a fan of a lot of his work. His podcasts are really cool. Sometimes I do think he does lean. He mentions this a bunch in the Tucker interview. He's like, I did 30 hours on this subject and like 24 hours on this other subject. So sometimes he kind of pulls this thing where it's like, I talked about it so much that I must be right. Like, but yeah, he did this really
I
good.
should say I'm a fan too. I think his history podcasts are great. I think he picked up the mantle of like very deep level Dan Carlin-esque history
Yeah,
stuff that there's
yeah,
always a huge audience for, but I think it's so labor intensive to like, read a bunch of books for one podcast that very few people do it. So like credit to him for that. I think it's another like I don't know, tragedy of the modern media environment where like, yes, I wish we lived in a world where, and I'm not trying to be mean to him. This is probably true of me too, but it's like, I wish we lived in a universe where his, his podcast exists and he didn't have a Twitter account and we'd never seen him on TV, because he's very disciplined in his history podcast. Like he may have his takes, but he's pretty good at, I think, suppressing the types of things that Arturo was talking about, like his more histrionic or emotive statements. I think he suppresses that well in the podcast format. And then when he appears in these other forums, he totally reveals like which facts of history he has insane emotional responses to. And like as an enjoyer of the podcast, I wish I didn't know that, because I enjoy the podcast more thinking like, oh, this is such a sober like scholar.
Yeah, and a lot of in the last, especially since Trump was elected, obviously a lot of people have sort of like shown their asses and like proven to be histrionic in various ways. And I'm thinking of Stephen King specifically and how
Well, we can go right back to Dan Carlin. I want to talk about Carlin for a second. Like he and Martyrmaid has totally filled the vacuum of the Dan Carlin art, like type, like the guy that does long form history and does it from a Carlin always presented as like I think he's more like libertarian or whatever, but he always kind of read as conservative or something. Um, but he just totally, the Trump era like ruined him. His output just totally plummeted, and then he had all these statements like I'm reevaluating a bunch of things, and uh, basically he kind of have you guys followed his thing at all? He's become kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, he's definitely representative of an archetype too, because there are these guys, they often do start as libertarians or were at one point where like most of their adult life was spent thinking like, oh, I'm kind of above the fray, maybe I'll vote. But like the actual, I would say like infantile view of history they were cultivating is they sort of fancy themselves like dictator detectors. Like they're very hip to the aesthetics of totalitarianism. And so like if the wrong kind of populism comes around, they just totally freak out.
Yeah,
And I think that's the case with like and it's such like I don't know, again, I'm gonna be mean, but it's such a Gen X thing to just be like some guy with those like weird hats that people in bands wear, and you're like at a lame bar drinking an IPA, and you're like, guys, you know I don't vote, but like I read a lot of fucking books, and like the way this Trump guy looks, it has certain resonances with history, guys. Like just trust me.
have you seen Carlin? Carlin's got I don't know if it was like a year or two ago. He had that big back and forth with Bog Beef. Did you see that?
Oh, they actually interacted? No, I don't think I saw
I
that.
think if I remember, I mean, I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure they had multiple rounds back and forth, and Bog Beef was getting the best of him for sure.
No, I'll have to look for that because yeah, Bog Beef has talked about Carlin a lot on Good Old Boys. I think both like the value of his podcast and his sort of sad descent into uh
Yeah,
you
and
know.
Carlin's called Martyr Made like a fascist as well. He's just really lost it. He's really lost it.
I liked when he said the swear word joke.
What did he do? I don't remember.
No, that was a George Carlin
Oh,
reference.
George. Oh, yeah, the seven deadly whatever.
That was good. But so like this phenomenon that we've identified, of the like serious person revealing themselves as dumb on Twitter. I do feel like there's a second layer to it, where it's like now there's another type of related person who like uses their, I guess you could say, antics on Twitter. Like that's how you begin to know them, and then like they have a serious side project they try to promote alongside it. I kind of think Richard Hanani is something similar to this. Like he's really annoying on Twitter. I can't even follow him anymore. But like apparently he still tries to be like somewhat sober on Substack, and I think conceptualize that as like the serious thing he's trying to promote by being an ass. And I think that's another, I guess you might say, problem with like the modern media sculptures that you know, however, it becomes its own promotional technique to be histrionic.
Yeah,
Yes, like I think you can see with him and with some other people, and this is impressive in a way because it means like they're sort of not. I think the reason most of us don't do that, I mean, most of us, nobody's interested in us anyway, but it's like it's almost vanity to be like, no, I want my Twitter account to be me. Like I will feel some like identity injury if my timeline is just something totally different than what I actually believe. But I sort of assume the type of guy Hanania is, he's just like, if you do this kind of bait content, you get like this many new eyes per month. And if you get that many new eyes per month, you get like this amount of paid Substack subscribers.
Yeah,
And
and I mean,
that
like,
is,
if I was getting paid for it, I might be tempted to do something. But I mean, I'm not making any money. The only thing I get out of doing this is, the identity or whatever. So of course I have no incentive to do that. But I can see how someone might.
You're not getting any night owl bucks.
No, I'm paying for it. Shit.
oh, I don't know, Arturo? Did you catch? I think I already told you about this, but on our we did an episode with Geo,
Oh yeah,
and someone referenced Arturo, and he's like, Arturo from Night Owls.
yeah. You told me about that. That's good. I'm glad
Yeah.
that's the association people have with me.
um, but real quick, oh yeah, did you guys see Martyr Made posted his like Substack stats? It
Oh
was
yeah,
insane. It was insane. His paid subs, which he already must have. I mean, if I had to guess, he had, I don't know, 5,000 paid subs, or at least a couple thousand probably. It like five to 10x bigger after his Tucker appearance. Like he literally is. quintupled his income that month.
I think I'm gonna make another like lame, annoying point here, which is that like I'm pro Tucker. I know people like turn on him or think he's fucking up or whatever, but like this, and look, his instincts are better than mine, so I'll just trust and support him. But I do think this kind of interview, it always makes me wonder, like Tucker is casting the net incredibly wide in terms of like weird outsider voices he's going to bring on his show, and that's probably good. But I would never tell him not to do something, not that he'd listen to me. But I do
And
think
he's apparently touring with Russell Brand.
yeah, I do think this episode was one where I was like, and he's had a couple where I was like, I hope he gets to keep doing this. Uh, like I hope this doesn't become a problem for him. That was
Well, he
was one of
survived. He like what wasn't it like his second episode when he started doing his own thing, where he had like the guy that said he had sex with Obama.
oh,
Yeah, I was that
yeah.
was like a year ago. I was just thinking about that because I was looking at my tweets from 1 year ago today, and I was talking about that.
It was
So
like right at the.
it's been brave truth tellers from the beginning. You're
It
saying
was right at the beginning. I was like, oh, it's over for Tucker. Oh no. And that guy
yeah.
was probably
I think
telling the truth, but
you
Yeah,
can
no,
tell that the generations have very different ideas of like even within the realm of like dissident outsider opinion, like what is embarrassing versus what is worth engaging with. And I think
yeah.
like a lot of the Gen X and Boomer people are just like, everybody can come on. And like maybe that's not the worst attitude. I don't know.
He had cat turd as well.
That's right.
One of the things that this made me think about is just like, you can't just say stuff anymore. You used to be able to say stuff in this country. I'm going to put on my Gen X cap
I
for a
have
second.
read that in
But
history books.
like you used to be able to like, this is obviously just two guys talking about stuff. Like, granted, you were asking like, does he actually believe this stuff? And like, who cares to a certain extent, but like he probably is just saying stuff. But like now, like with the media matters style journalism that like prevails today, where it's like you grab the clip that sounds bad and then you frame it in an even worse way and tell everyone what to think about it, like, and then they end your career or whatever. Like, I guess they're losing some of that power now, but like that's the reaction to it was very much that from the right and the left. It's just how like journalism, quote unquote, is done now, where it's like you grab the most incriminating thing someone has said, you chop it and make it look even worse, and then you explain to the dum-dums why what they're saying makes them evil and bad. And it's just like it's such a formula now. Like, they did it with JD Vance, they did it with they do it with Trump all the time.
Yeah, I've always found the idea of how they every time if Tucker has someone like this on his show, then they do this whole thing like is it responsible or platforming, and like you see these tweets about like people trying to distinguish between a conversation and an interview and stuff, and yeah, it's like
and always when you go watch the source material, it's always like, oh, that's not that bad.
yeah.
And also, it looks really responsible that he has cat turd on in retrospect, because now if he gets yelled at about Martyrmade, he can say, well, I already had Zion's strongest soldier.
It's actually kind of funny. This is one area where it's like the woke might be more correct, because I mean, I don't know. It's just like most people are pretty dumb, and like, so I used to just be like, yeah, let's just like put everything out there and let people decide. Let the marketplace of ideas do its job. But like, I don't know if that really works. I mean, I'm not that interested in like policing stuff, but at the same time, people are people are too dumb to actually like filter through the stuff.
Yeah. And like when I had a public Twitter presence, my least favorite thing was like explaining jokes. And
Yeah.
but like to not upset people, you have to be very explicit. Like, hey, everyone, this means this, and this is why I said it. Like otherwise, people just get mad at you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I do think, and I don't even want to reveal where I stand on this, but I think it's very funny that like I suspect Elon and certain like tech libertarians, they actually think like total unfettered free speech and access to information is like a good thing and will lead to good outcomes for society. I actually think in the internet age, that's increasingly hard to believe. And if you want to justify it, you justify it on the grounds of like, well, giving the state or companies the power to weigh in and pick winners and losers like is not working out well. But it's just funny that I sort of take the NRX position to be that like the reason freedom of association or freedom of speech worked in America for a time is that like the average person was an incredibly independent, responsible, like 115 IQ Anglo Protestant, and that like that those are the conditions that like libertarian governance works in, and unless you have a similar like polity, this won't make any sense. And so it's just funny that like in the current political climate that those people who secretly believe that have been like thrown on side with Elon like yes let's protect free speech because like we don't want the longhouse like the HR state to stop us from saying things. But I don't think any of these people actually think that like you should just let plebs like read whatever books they want. Like
Mm-hmm.
clearly that's part of the problem.
Well,
Like
like
if you
Granite is famously the always whenever any video goes viral, he's like, "Hey, everyone, you realize this is staged and acted, right?" and
Yeah,
and
and
nobody ever does or cares.
I hate that that's my like impulse. I always like I wish I could just let it go, but then once I see like people I like believing it, I was like I have to comment.
well right
But
the whole like I think there's like a Chomsky-esque argument about media that's supported by the right wing, which is that like you really just decide at which point the manipulation happens. And it's like in traditional societies, it's like when there was not enough proliferation of media, the state or priests or some entity was like, we're going to look at every pamphlet before it gets posted in public. And if we think it has bad ideas, we're going to like, we're going to take it down or not let it be published. And like clearly in more quote unquote open societies, the idea is just like, well, everyone's hanging up shit in the public square. So the way the state and other powerful institutions are going to respond to that is just by also posting like the most odious and insane lies to like paralyze and confuse the public. And like, yes, I guess that does mean everybody can post their pamphlet in the town square, but it's not correct to describe that as like a free and open environment. It's like an incredibly
Mhm.
deranged and heavily managed environment. It's managed at
Yeah.
a different point of the process.
Well, Martyr Made in his thing, he kind of gets at he alludes to some of this stuff because he prefaces it all but with how this is like the founding myth of America of post-war America and it might be better that everyone just believe it even if it's not literally true. Like maybe it's not good that like now a bunch of people uh are sort of because what you're gonna get now is a lot of people who are gonna say, well, Churchill was the bad guy, but they didn't even really understand like Martyr Made's points. They just sort of heard it, but they're like too dumb to actually onboard like
Yes,
what his argument was.
he's totally right about that because the question that he's smart enough to ask is like, wait, so are we supposed to process every war as we did Vietnam and the second Iraq War? Because it's obvious like that's pathological in a completely different and perhaps more destructive way. Because like the normal healthy setting is when your civilization wins a war, you make the heroes of the war saints and you tell rosy lies about how awesome you were. Like that's a normal historical setting, and even if you think it's historically inaccurate, you can say like healthy societies that believe in themselves and project their will onto the world, like that's how they respond to victory in war. Whereas like the Vietnam setting and the Iraq war setting, where it's like even during the war, most of the public is like, this seems like a terrible idea. We're pretty sure it's wrong. We're pretty sure it's based on lies. Like the historical precedent for that is that if your public reacts that way to a war, you would either want to end the war immediately or like there'd be regime change.
To keep listening, subscribe to the Granite Mountain Movie Club Premium XL Prestige Sigma bonus stream on Substack.com.